We haven't seen inflation numbers like this for decades in the US or in most major countries around the world. And it's not just that we have particular inflation pressures from supply chains or autos or energy, but also we have the threat to inflation expectations. Because if people start expecting inflation to be rising, they're going to be asking for higher wages. If firms feel that they can pass those costs along, we can get into a situation like we had in a few decades ago where inflation keeps going on.
Randy, are there good aspects to that conversation, though? Because there's a feeling that low-end wages have been low for just too long, and corporates have been effectively cleaning up on some of the margins, and that's just going to shareholders, not across the economy. Is it a bad thing if we do see some wage pressure at the lower end of the economy?
Well, the real issue is real wages, so inflation-adjusted wages. And so certainly wages have been starting to rise more rapidly, but inflation has been rising even faster. And so that's a problem because the real purchasing power, the amount of goods and services they can buy with the wages, even though they're increased, haven't increased enough. Also, something that's important to note is the U.S. is a bit of an outlier on this. As you just heard in that clip, they're talking about global supply chains, energy. Those are global prices. But U.S. inflation has been much higher than in other countries. And I think that's because of a big fiscal push that's there, much bigger than in other countries.
Randy, we know that the central bank game has become highly politicised in recent years, despite Joe Biden trying to take some of the heat out of this with the reappointment of Jay Powell. But we're counting down to the midterms, and there's a feeling now, even in Democratic circles, that taking some of the extraordinary stimulus away may be useful if we're going to try and tame inflation and not hurt low-end incomes, real incomes, as you talk about. What do you think the push is? As you look at the political moves stateside, do you think there is now enough motivation for some form of retreat from this extraordinary policy?
I think there should be. I hope Senator Manchin holds the line on this. We've spent on the order of almost 50% of GDP, including some of the current plans, since last March. Now, the initial response of 15% of GDP, that happened a lot around the world. I think that was perfectly reasonable because of the great uncertainty. But the U.S. keeps spending and spending and spending. And so I think that it's just putting too much pressure on the economy. And we should just take a step back for a little bit to assess where the inflation pressure is coming from. Is it something that is global? Is it something that's outside of the U.S.? Although I think a lot of it is inside the U.S.